bone or sinew, and they just make absolute mincemeat of it. And they have an incredible sense of smell, so they can pick up the scent of prey or carrion from over a mile away. And of course they have enormous canine teeth and stout carnassials or cheek teeth, which they use to grind up flesh, but also crush through bone and sinew. And of course, the Tasmanian devil is primarily a scavenger, so much of its food is found dead already, but it is a predator and it will hunt things like lizards, frogs, and other amphibians, through to birds, fish or small mammals. And even though they are quite small, I mean, they have a tiny little body and an enormous head. And although they might only be small, they would probably shred me if I was in an enclosure with them. But unfortunately, Tasmanian devils are probably the most endangered and threatened of Australia's wildlife. And there are many reasons for that. I mean, one of the main reasons was just over 200 years ago when Europeans arrived with livestock and guns, and they decimated much of Australia's unique wildlife. Tassie devils were very badly affected, but in the 1990s it was discovered that there is some form of cancer that only affects Tasmanian devils, and it causes tumours around the eyes, the nose and the mouth, which makes it very difficult for them to hunt and feed, and that has been destroying their numbers in the wild over the last 35 years. And to me that is absolutely heartbreaking, and it's meant now that there's only a few pockets of them left, and one of their few remaining strongholds is on the island of Tasmania. But there is hope, because scientists are working to create a vaccine for the Tassie devil cancer, although they haven't made it fully yet. They are still working on that. But also, fairly recently, Tasmanian devils were reintroduced to mainland Australia in specially constructed enclosures which are big enough for their territories, but also to see how they get on on mainland Australia, and hopefully that will help increase their numbers and bring back some balance to some of Australia's natural world. Of course, here is the range of the Tasmanian devil. And as I mentioned, when they've been reintroduced to the mainland, they were introduced around here, and hopefully they will be able to survive there, and they will come back to the rest of mainland Australia. The next animal I'm going to show you is probably Australia's hardiest creature, but also a very popular pet. It is the budgie. Now, a lot of you are probably at home thinking that budgies are just very cute pets you can keep, but they're not just pets, they are Australian birds. In fact, they are some of the hardiest creatures in Australia, because they can travel for miles to find food and water out in the outback, and they will do this by flocking together in millions, and they will find a source of water and food, and they will stay there for days or weeks even. And one of the advantages of being in big groups is it gives them protection from birds of prey like hawks and falcons that eat budgies. And they are herbivores, so they eat plants, seeds, and fruit, but they might occasionally eat insects to supplement their diets. And of course, as a lot of you probably know, budgies are also kept as pets, but pet budgies are specifically bred to be kept as pets. They aren't taken from the wild. They're specially bred to be kept as pets, which is, in my opinion, a good thing, because if they're taken from the wild, then that is just a little bit unfair. And here is the range of the budgies in Australia. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably the natural world equivalent to an alien. It is the giant cuttlefish. Giant cuttlefish are some of the most bizarre looking animals on the planet. And probably the most famous thing about cuttlefish is that they can change their colour, the colour of their bodies, like a chameleon, but they can also create hypnotic lights, and that can be a way to describe their mood. It can be to intimidate a rival, to attract a mate, or even to hypnotise their prey. And cuttlefish actually have some of the most advanced vision of any creature. They can actually see polarised light, which gives them an advantage over their prey. And of course, for 3 months of each year, cuttlefish in Australia gather in one bay in their millions to breed, and that's when they can show off their lethal side when the males, because that's a male right there, and he's a lot bigger than the female. When two males will quite often size each other up to see who gets to have the best mate. Another thing about cuttlefish that I find most incredible is how they hunt. And when I said that they can change their colour to blend in with their background like a chameleon, they can also make themselves look like anything around them. Like, it could be seaweed, it could be rocks, it could be anything that they can change their body shape to look like. And then they just sneak up on their prey, which can be a fish, a squid, or their favourite food, a crab, and boom! They launch two large tentacles at them, and they slam into a crab, and then, of course, the crab can't escape, and then it's dinner time. And of course, cuttlefish are not dangerous to humans. I mean, if you were a crab, these would be your living nightmare. Of course, this is the bay where the cuttlefish in Australia gather to breed. And of course, they can be there for about 3 months of the year, and of course, it's where they all come in to breed and come to find a mate and breed and have young. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably the 5th most venomous snake on the planet. It is the tiger snake. Tiger snakes are in the same family as the cobras. They're called elapids, and like all members of the cobra family, they have fixed fangs on the upper jaw that point downwards and fixed. So they're not hinged like the fangs of a viper, and because they're fixed to the upper jaw, they can only strike going downwards. But also, they can spread their ribs into a hood. and that is to make themselves look bigger and more threatening. And this snake's venom is probably more toxic than a king cobra, than a black mamba, or a boomslang. And what it has, and that's all down to its prey, which is frogs, because frogs are the favourite food of a tiger snake. And what you want, and of course if you're a tiger snake and these fast amphibians are on the menu, you want to be able to kill them quickly so they don't hop away and leave you hungry. That is why a tiger snake's venom is so effective. One bite and a frog has probably less than a minute to live. And there's probably enough venom in a tiger snake bite to kill a handful of people. In fact, try and imagine if you've been unlucky enough to accidentally step on a tiger snake and it bites you. The bite itself wouldn't be that bad, but inside your body it's a completely different story as toxins in the venom dissolve and eat your muscles, and then you feel a tingling in your hands and feet. You can't keep your eyes open and you can feel your throat starting to close, and it becomes very difficult for you to move your arms and legs. Meanwhile, the venom is also attacking your nervous system, your blood is beginning to thicken into sticky clumps, and the muscles around your heart and lungs seize up and you stop breathing. And then paralysis will set in. Of course, if you don't get help in the form of anti-venom, it could all be over within an hour. But tiger snakes very rarely bite people. In fact, a lot of the time, all they really want to do is escape from danger. In fact, their first instinct is to flee to get away. And they will only strike if they feel like there's no other choice. Of course, you're all probably wondering how they got the name tiger snake. It's down to the patterning down their back. In fact, they have yellow and black bands running down the body, and that's what gave them the name tiger snake. And of course, tiger snakes very rarely bite people. I mean, a lot of the time they just want to escape from you, and I mean, the only time they will bite you is if you're threatened, or cornered, or if you are unlucky enough to accidentally step on one. But these days, a trip to the hospital and a dose of anti-venom and you'll be right as rain. However, it would still hurt. A lot. Here is the range of the tiger snake. As you can see, they tend to stay in South Australia. I guess because it's a lot cooler and wetter there. And that's where their favourite food, frogs, are. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is probably one of the fastest fish in the sea. It is the blue-finned tuna. Now, blue-finned tuna are some of the fastest fish on Earth, and they can accelerate as fast as a sports car at just over 40 miles per hour. And they are probably the most hydrodynamic fish on the planet. But also, tuna can grow to be very, very big. Bluefin tuna can probably grow to be as big as I am, but the biggest tuna ever recorded was heavier than a horse. And, of course, tuna don't eat people. They actually eat small fish like sardines and herring. And what they do is they basically corral sardines into a tight bait ball, and then it's one of the greatest spectacles in nature where, like here, they almost come out of the water to grab fish, grab a fish, and in less than probably about 30 minutes, tuna will have eaten an entire shoal of sardines. In fact, when